The flames hiss as the iron brand glows red. A young woman kneels in the dirt courtyard of Athens, her wrists bound, her back bare. She's trembling, not from the cold, but from the knowledge of what's about to happen. The overseer holds up a bronze rod, its tip glowing white, hot. The mark carved into its end, a single Greek letter, the emblem of her master's house, flashes like a serpent's eye. The crowd of citizens watches. No one flinches. No one looks away. The iron comes down, a sharp hiss, a scream that shatters the morning air, and just like that, her identity is erased. From that moment, she is no longer Callista of Thrace. She's property, burned flesh owned by another. That was Athens, the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and reason. But behind the marble statues and proud speeches about liberty, there existed a nightmare that history tried to hide. The systematic torture and dehumanization of enslaved women. While the men of Athens debated freedom in the agora, women like Callista learned what freedom cost and how easily it could be taken away. In the 5th century BCE, Athens was at the height of its glory, a city of poets, philosophers, and statesmen. But its beauty was built on suffering. For every citizen who voted in the assembly, there were at least 3 slaves, men and women who had no rights, no names, no hope. Most female slaves, known as doulai, came from conquered lands Thrace, Phrygia, Lydia, or the Black Sea coasts. They were captured as children, sold in markets like livestock, and branded like cattle. The Athenians called themselves lovers of freedom, but they never meant freedom for everyone. Athenian men could discuss virtue and justice for hours, then go home and beat their enslaved maid for spilling wine. The same men who built temples to goddesses like Athena and Artemis were the ones ordering the punishment of real women in their own homes. Imagine waking up before dawn every morning to begin the endless cycle of labor. Grinding grain until your hands blood, fetching water from wells miles away, weaving until your fingers cracked open, cooking, cleaning, nursing, and serving, always watched, always judged, never safe. But the physical exhaustion was only part of the punishment. The real horror was that your body wasn't your own. Athenian law made it clear. A slave had no legal self. If a master desired her, she could not refuse. If she became pregnant, the child wasn't hers, it was his property. If she spoke out, she could be whipped for insolence. No one called it rape, they called it ownership. The whip and the law in Athens, violence against slaves wasn't a crime, it was protocol. Whipping was routine, and sometimes even public. If a female slave disobeyed, her master or overseer, the pedagogos, had full right to lash her. But there were moments when her suffering became part of the civic show. Punishments carried out in public view, near markets and temples, as if to remind everyone, this is what happens when property forgets its place. Even the courts institutionalized cruelty. When a slave's testimony was needed in a trial, it wasn't requested. It was extracted through torture. The Greeks called it paisanos, meaning testing the truth through pain. To them, a slave could only speak truth if screaming. Branding was the ultimate symbol of domination. For women forced to work in public bathhouses or brothels, the state demanded they be permanently marked, burned with hot bronze tools that left letters seared into their skin. Some brands were placed on the arm or thigh, but most on the forehead, so no veil, no clothing could hide the mark. It told the world that she belonged to someone, that she could never escape. In Athens' bustling agora, merchants inspected branded women like one might check a coin for authenticity. Officials called polietai were authorized to look for these marks, proof that the body in front of them was certified property. To the Athenians, this was normal. To the women, it was hell. The smell of burning flesh mingled with the chatter of the marketplace, and nobody stopped it. Inside the grand homes of Athens, behind marble columns and painted walls. Female slaves lived lives of silent endurance. They were trapped within the oikos, the household under the rule of the kyrios, the male master. Every task was endless: cooking, weaving, cleaning, carrying water, tending fires, caring for the children. Every mistake risked a beating. Every act of defiance could mean torture. But even worse than the whip was isolation. These women rarely saw the outside world. They couldn't gather, couldn't form friendships, couldn't speak freely. They were ghosts in the home, invisible, indispensable, and utterly powerless. Historians describe Athens as a society obsessed with order. But the price of that order was silence. And that silence was enforced through pain, public punishment. There are records, fragmentary, buried in plays, speeches, and inscriptions, that describe punishments carried out in the open. A slave woman accused of theft might be stripped and flogged in front of a crowd. A runaway might be chained to a post for days, food withheld. And sometimes, to prove obedience, masters would force other enslaved women to watch. The Athenians called it discipline, but it was spectacle, control through terror. Even in comedies, the light entertainment of the Athenian elite, slave women appear as beaten, mocked, or humiliated figures. The laughter of the audience was another form of punishment, a reminder that their suffering was part of the cultural norm. The greatest tragedy is not that Athens allowed this, but that it justified it. Philosophers like Aristotle openly claimed that slavery was natural. He wrote that some people were born to rule, and others to serve, living tools. He called them possessions with souls. And so the city that invented democracy also invented the perfect lie, that freedom could exist alongside bondage, that reason could coexist with cruelty. When the Athenians sculpted their gods and heroes, they carved ideals in marble. But behind every statue was a woman with scars on her back, holding the chisel, cleaning the dust, bleeding in silence. The forgotten voices, no words survive from the enslaved women themselves. Their pain was not recorded in scrolls or laws. It lived only in whispers, in broken pottery, in fragments of plays written by men who never cared to know their names. But their suffering shaped everything Athens built. Every philosopher who preached about justice ate food cooked by slaves. Every sculptor who celebrated beauty profited from the labor of branded women. Every citizen who voted for freedom stood on the backs of those who had none. They were the invisible architects of Athenian greatness and its greatest victims. 2.5 millennia later, we still admire Athens as the birthplace of democracy. But democracy for whom? The same society that praised liberty also normalized public torture. The same culture that worshipped goddesses turned real women into property. And the same thinkers who invented ethics ignored the screams echoing from their own kitchens. To understand ancient Athens, you have to look beyond the marble, into the shadows where truth hides, because there, in those forgotten corners of history, you find the real cost of civilization, the lives of women who were never meant to be remembered. So the next time someone praises the wisdom of the ancients, remember Callista, the girl whose freedom was burned off her skin. Remember the nameless thousands who were branded, beaten, and broken. Not because they sinned, but because they were born on the wrong side of power. Athens called itself the city of light, but for its enslaved women, it was a city of endless night.